Hi, this is the second video in a set of 3, which is dealing with bearing replacement in a Hotpoint WF range washing machine. However, as I stated in the previous video, this container is also used in a range of other machines manufactured by Hotpoint, Creda, Indesit and Ariston. If you watched the previous video, you would have seen how we removed the container to get to where we are now, so we should now continue. Turn the container on its front and use the handle of a hammer or a block of wood and wedge it between the spokes of the pulley and a recess on the tub. This will prevent the pulley from turning when you undo the bolt. Use a 13mm socket or spanner, but be careful, some of these bolts were put in with Loctite and in some cases the head of the bolt was sheared off and you would then need to replace the drum support. The pulley may just lift off, or you could have to lever it off with the aid of a screwdriver or two. Use a piece of wood to protect the shaft and hit it a few times. This should free it from the bearings. The two halves of the container are held together by 16 T30 Torx screws, which need to be removed. Then with the aid of a large flat screwdriver you can separate them. The inner drum should now just lift out, but you may need to bounce it lightly on the ground a few times if the shaft is still tight in the bearings. This drum support isn't that bad and could be cleaned up and left on, but I'll be replacing it later in the video just to show how it's done. The rear half of this container has 4 locating lugs around the outside which fit into the front end when assembled, so it's advisable when knocking the inner bearings out to rest it on something such as wooden blocks, so they are not in direct contact with the ground. This method would also aid in protecting the heater terminals when the container is turned over to knock the outer bearings out. It really doesn't matter which bearing you remove first, but use an iron rod or chisel as a punch to strike the bearing with. Vary the striking point on the face of the bearing so it comes out smoothly and not lopsided, or this may damage the seating in the housing, which should be clean and smooth. Now turn the container over, and as with the first bearing, make sure the container is resting on something above ground, such as the wooden blocks. Remove this bearing in the same fashion as the first. The water seal comes out with the inner bearing, but it's replaced separately. Here we have a new set of 30mm bearings, water seal, drum support and 3 screws. The screws are because it's unwise to try and undo the ones on the drum support. They're normally rusted in, and you would probably snap the end off the Torx bit trying. This would then mean you wouldn't be able to drill the screw out and would need to buy a new drum as well. If you need to replace the support, then drill the screws out. The inside edge of the inner bearing housing has a small lip. The reason is the water seal is slightly larger in diameter than the bearing, and the advantage of this is the bearing can be easily seated part way into its housing. Make sure the collar is clean and free from grit before placing the bearing in the housing. Then use your block of wood and tap it down until it's level with the tub. Clean the inside of the container as much as possible before fitting the new bearings. This way it will minimise getting any grit in the housing, and it will reduce the possibility of bacteria building up, which would cause the machine to smell later. Now use a steel rod or chisel, and by varying the striking point and hitting only the outer collar of the bearing, tap it in. When it's fully in, you'll hear a difference in resistance when you hit the bearing. Another way to check is to turn the container over and look through the hole to see if the bearing is up to the centre ridge in the housing. Or you could just view the water hole, where the bearing should be more than halfway across it. This water seal, as you can see, comes in 2 parts. The centre is the seal itself, while the metal outer rim holds it fixed to the housing. Fit it in place and tap it down with the block of wood until it fits flush with the housing. The seal now has to be pulled out slightly from the rim before the rim is tapped in itself. As with the inner bearing, clean the housing with a bit of cloth, just to be certain it's clear from any grit or foreign objects. Now place the outer bearing in position and tap it in by striking only the outer collar and varying the position at which you hit it. Don't be too overzealous when hitting it, or it may go in wonky. When it's flush with the container, it's fully in. As previously stated, it's not advisable to try undoing the screws that hold the support onto the drum, because the Torx bits are prone to snapping, so the best solution is to drill them out. It's better to use a small drill first to make a pilot hole. This way the head of the screw will come off without too much effort when you attack it with a larger bit. Once you've drilled out all the screws, use a flat bladed screwdriver to lever the support away from the drum. In most cases the new support will fit very tightly and needs to be tapped in place. Fit all 3 screws before tightening any of them. This may save you from undoing some to realign the support. It is advisable to replace the joint seal after completing a bearing change or splitting the container. The seals have markers on that should be located at the top of the container. Some have 2 white marks on like this, and others have only one distinctive mark. Although the gully around the container is sufficiently large enough to fit the seal flat, they actually fit in the upright position. Just to be on the safe side, you may want to put a bead of silicone sealant around the seal just to prevent the possibility of a leak after the machine has been reassembled. Lower the rear end of the container onto the drum and fit the pulley. Make sure the pulley is on the right way round before you fit the washer and bolt. Just as you did when you loosened the bolt, insert the handle of a hammer or a block of wood between the spoke and into the recess of the container, and now tighten the bolt. Turn the rear section of the container over and fit the front end over the drum. Because of its shape and the 4 mouldings, it should only fit in one position. Around the edge of the container are a series of numbers 1 to 16. These correspond to screw holes on the outer rim. Refit and tighten screws 1, 10, 14 and 5. This way the front end will go on evenly. But try to locate them in the original thread, because failure to do so could strip the thread, and don't over tighten them either, because this could also strip the thread. That concludes the second part of this 3-part video, and the container is now ready to be put back into the cabinet, which is in the 3rd and final video. On behalf of Selfix UK, we'd like to thank you for watching this video and hope you found it interesting. Goodbye.